Hello, folks. It's Heather Reed here with episode number 3 of Event Contracts Exposed. I am so excited to be here with you today. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a 60-year-old white female sitting in my home office with wall-to-wall bookcases behind me. I'm wearing a navy blue blouse, have ash-colored hair, and I'm wearing red glasses. So today we're here to discuss the truth about hidden fees. And I actually thought I probably should rename it to My Truth About Hidden Fees because the is kind of definitive sounding. So we're going to dive into what I know to be true about hidden fees, share some horror stories from listeners that we got ahead of time, and discuss the steps that planners can take to avoid unexpected costs. So I want to remind folks that I am not legal counsel. I am a 30-year experienced meeting professional. And the discussions here today do not in any way constitute or provide or suggest legal advice. And two, I know that you're going to have some questions now or during the replay. So please don't hesitate to put those in the comments whenever and wherever you are viewing this. And we'll do our best to address them live or in future episodes or get back to you. So, as my colleague Anthea Rowe joins me on screen, I'd like to ask folks to comment, where did you hear about today's episode? We would love to know where folks heard about this because we are trying our darndest to get the news out about this LinkedIn episode. So, Anthea, over to you.
Great. Thanks, Heather. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for starting to see your comments come in about where you heard from us. I am a 45-year-old white woman with long blondish hair. I like ash, the way you said that, Heather. Sitting in a home office with similarly books behind me, a bookshelf, and a navy wall, wearing a navy dress. My pronouns are she, her.
Super. So you're here today to help ask me some questions so I can stay on track, and you're going to monitor comments and things like that. So let's get right into the deep stuff.
Perfect. I will do my best, and I'll do my best to monitor people's thoughts and comments. If we can't get them to them all, like Heather said, we'll answer them later. So Heather, off the top, why do many event planners feel suppliers lack transparency about their fees?
The short answer, because it's our lived reality. And by that, I mean that most planners have experienced some sort of post-event invoice shock. They've opened up that invoice to find an unexpected charge, unexpected fee, surcharge. And if a planner hasn't experienced it themselves, I know that they know of someone who has. The other thing I know to be true is that our industry publications are saturated with examples. Our Slack channels with industry professionals in it, Facebook groups, etc. The lack of transparency actually is one of the top concerns for event planners. Actually, Anthea, just yesterday, we're starting to see some government involvement in consumer, and what I would say in our case as planners, our attendees. We're starting to see some attendee-facing situations to be addressed. Yesterday, the U.S. Federal Trade Commission banned the burying of junk fees on short-term lodging and tickets to live events. So when you read the article, it says the fees aren't going to disappear, but they must now be disclosed upfront and the total cost must be displayed more prominently. So I'm glad to see that we're getting movement in the US, and what happens in the US always comes to Canada at some point, which is where I'm at, or you and I are at. So I'm glad that there's movement there, but I also think that there's just as many surprises or hidden charges that are not attendee facing, but in fact, they are client facing. So in other words, the planner is seeing the additional fees, the additional penalties or surcharges. It's not the ones that are going to the attendee for their guest room. They're ones that are coming to the planner or to the client for the event itself. So.
Okay. Yeah, and so that was the Federal Trade Commission in the U.S. And yeah, like you said, Canada will follow presumably, and then also from the consumer side to hopefully the client side, the event planners, event hosts. And for those people listening to the replay, we're recording this on December 18th, 2024. So then that banning by the FTC was December 17th,
Good
2024.
point.
Got it. Okay. And yeah, was it Julius Solaris in his popular newsletter who said lack of transparency around fees was one
Yeah.
of the top issues.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
okay, so like, is it a conspiracy? Are hidden fees by venues and suppliers, like, is it their way of trying to trick us out of, or trick planners out of their precious budgets? Like, tell me a bit about.
So hidden fees to me implies intentional concealment. It's maybe even suggests dishonesty, which to me is a deceptive practice. And I've never been on the supplier partner side of this industry. So I don't know what the rationale is, but I absolutely don't believe it is to trick us. I don't believe, and I don't want to believe that it is to be deceptive in their practices. However, the term hidden fees does carry a negative connotation. And for us as planners, it doesn't lend itself to building trust or to being able to make informed decisions. So, as I said, I personally, and some would say probably naively, don't believe that supplier partners are out there to try and trick and deceive us. I actually believe that it is our responsibility as planners to suss out every possible financial impact to our events and our budgets. And it's one of our core responsibilities. We need to acknowledge that these things exist, and we need to work extremely hard to reveal them each and every time we encounter both a contract negotiation and a post-event invoice.
So we can't just stomp our feet and say that suppliers are being mean, as much as we love to. So you were getting some comments from Katie says, recently received a hotel bill that included a service charge on room rentals, totaling an additional $800 over the initial. Sounds pretty common, right? Received final hotel bill. This is Emily, with a service charge added, Encore AV costs. Yeah. So it sounds like it's like everyone here today listening to has experienced it. So, I mean, we've talked about them in kind of abstract. Like, what are some actual examples of hidden fees that many planners encounter?
So, as I said, to me, there are some attendee-facing ones, and there are also client ones. So, if you're thinking about your attendees, it might be their sleeping room. It could be everything from Wi-Fi to phone calls from in the room to in-room safes, room service charges, early departure fees. One of our listeners that registered to attend was saying even early check-in fees are now being assigned. It could be minibar restocking. If you take something out, it counts it as being sold, even if you put it back in. Newspaper delivery, luggage storage. There's all sorts of attendee-facing ones that we need to be very aware of. But when we're looking at event contracts, we also need to think about the client and meeting spaces, just like, was it Katie said that there was a service charge on room rentals? Absolutely, very, very common that there are now administrative/service fees on meeting room rentals. One example that was given to us on LinkedIn was an HVAC surcharge for after hours events. Well, oh my God, you're renting a room. They know the time of day. Why is there an HVAC charge on top of meeting space rental? An example given was the use of wall sockets. One planner witnessed the hotel representative going around and counting how many wall sockets were being used and given a daily charge for additional power. Cost to access lighting panels or lighting remotes, cost for water stations. I know there was an example given that outdoor event space is rented. And of course, we're shown with, patio umbrellas and heaters. And then, no, it's the bare surface. And now you need to rent the umbrellas and you need to rent the heaters. So there's all sorts of sources for meeting space fees in addition to the core price of rental. And then if we talk about food and beverage, which is another big component of the event world, I've heard that condiments for coffee and tea can be at a surcharge, that our coffee and tea service does not include honey, or does not include, whatever. Sugar, I don't drink either. So, it could be that water stations on a banquet table now have a charge. There's so many, and I don't want to take time on what are the charges. I think we don't have to look too far, and I think we can learn from one another about all the different examples. What I really want to spend the meat and time here today is on what can we do to address these kinds of hidden charges. So I think there's no lack of what is being labeled as hidden fees.
Right. And it sounds like it could be reinvented, right? So if you got good at asking, like, okay, well, the outdoor space, does that include the patio tables and umbrellas? Then maybe there'd be additional things later, like, oh, you didn't say that you wanted the speakers to be playing music out there, even though they're already wired in. Like, it sounds like, yeah, it could always just go on and on. So seems like what planners need is more of an approach. And I just want to acknowledge some of the things people have added in the comments. It sounds like they've been hit up for fees on things like
branding fees. Absolutely.
The bellman, yeah.
Yep.
Branding, like cling for in a room that you've already rented.
Elevators.
Heather, it's wild to hear you say like counting the electrical outlets that are being used, or HVAC. It's like, you weren't going to heat the room, or or air condition it. That is wild. Okay, so then, to your point, it's not about cataloging every single potential like hidden fee, and we'll talk about how you feel about that name in more detail. But what we've established that hidden fees are prominent in the industry. How do you think planners should be dealing with them?
So first and foremost, I just want to say I am a planner, and I've only ever been a planner. I've never been on the supplier partner side. And it's not that I don't have an appreciation. It's just that I am able to put on some blinders. And I want to share that these are my own seasoned thoughts and opinions. And maybe after 30 years, we can, if I can help inform someone's practice, that'd be great. So the first thing I would love to see planners do in dealing with hidden fees is to abolish or ban the term hidden fees from our industry's vernacular. We need to be negotiating in language that builds trust, first of all. We need to be negotiating using business terminology. We need to allow ourselves to be making informed decisions and really going after what does an informed decision include. That includes pricing. And it helps us reduce unnecessary and uncomfortable disputes later in the event continuum. So it's fair enough to say, well, okay, get rid of the word hidden fees, because that fosters just exactly what you asked me about, a lack of transparency or a conspiracy. No, let's use defined fees when we're talking proactively at our RFP stage, at our site selection stage, in our contracts. And then we also want to be using terminology like undisclosed fees. So this is, I want to kind of take that apart for you. So defined fees, so DEFINED, just in case I'm not clear, defined fees to me include supplementary fees, surcharges, penalties. They're fees that are created, or charges that are created to augment the supplier partner's revenue, to supplement. We know that we've all been to hell and back with COVID, as were they. They're trying to find creative ways to acquire revenue. And so defined fees, though, acknowledges that these fees exist and they're not, quote, hidden. So to me, I like the term defined fees, and I'll get into that more. And then undisclosed fees actually means not announced or kept private. And so when we are contracting for events, we want to say we've done our homework and our very, very best to uncover fees, etc., then we also want to address the fact that we may not have been told about all of the defined fees. And so they become undisclosed fees. And there's actually legal language that can go along with no undisclosed fees. So we'll get to that. So just so you understand the terminology that, so when we're at the RFP stage of sourcing venues and suppliers, we as planners should be seeking to uncover as many defined fees that exist as possible. So we covered sleeping room rates include, and you should have your own laundry list of everything that you've heard that a sleeping room rate might also be charged in addition to the sleeping room rate. Our food and beverage functions, we want to identify all of those examples that we're learning and are being disclosed here today. For example, all of those are defined expenses that may or may not exist in a property or with a supplier, but when we know of them, we are proactively asking them to identify, do they have them or don't they have them? Meeting space rental, the lighting controls, the HVAC, the number of units of staging, the water stations, the use of the wall sockets. We should have our own list of what we know in the industry exists as defined fees, surcharges, penalties, etc., however you want to call them. So, and there may also be miscellaneous fees, so things that don't fall into one of those three categories. And so we're really putting out there that we are aware that these fees exist and we are responsible for uncovering them, discussing them, negotiating them, and contracting them. So then when we get to the RFP stage, we should, in my opinion, be using always a defined fees checklist that accompanies our main RFP document. And I know this seems like a lot of work, but it's also a lot of work and a lot of uncomfortableness to discover these things after the fact. So clients should indicate clearly that RFP responses from supplier partners are not considered complete if the defined fees document has not been completed. That to me would be a bold step forward, is saying that, your piece of business may not, you may not win the piece of business if there isn't the transparency that is deserved. When you're shortlisting your potential supplier partners, or so these might be site visits, they might be exploratory conversations, that defined fees document that you've created should be reviewed and updated in collaboration with the supplier partner. And then you can negotiate to the best of your ability. And I'm going to say in proportion to the value of the piece of business that you are representing. It's not something we should expect everything if we're, a small piece of business. There may be some that are completely irrelevant, but really for honing in on what might be applicable. And then where my zone of experience in contracts is really, there's several things. One, every single word of a contract needs to be read and reread and reread in silence, out loud, whichever way that you read things, because the contracts are worded with very ambiguous wording. There may be a charge, at additional charge. It may be ambiguous wording that kind of skirts around the fact that there might be something else besides. Common sense might also tell you that, okay, they haven't laid out anything regarding sleeping rooms. All right, common sense and good practice, I know that there are fees that are going to come along with those. So at the contract stage, we should be using that document, but we should also be really looking for any opportunity in the wording that suggests that there would be additional charges. So that's one point I'd really like to make. Second, in our certification program, I teach what is the difference between an attachment, an amendment, an exhibit to a contract. And I want to focus on an exhibit to a contract. And this is a document that is attached to the contract that's viewed as sample documents. So they're documents that the parties intend to execute or deliver at some point in the future. And it could be that as planners, we require that the defined fees document is attached as an exhibit to the contract. Or if we, I know there are some properties that will disclose their pricing list. I've been fortunate to work with some of them. That pricing list, even if it's 2024 price list, is still attached to the contract as a benchmark, as a point of reference for future year business. So that's another way of documenting and including, is to ask and require for an exhibit to be attached to the main document. And a point of note there, if an attachment is, like if your exhibit is included, make sure you reference it in the body of the contract that exhibit A has been included. So making sure that they're always attached and connected. So, and then, okay, so I have one, so I know this is a long answer, but this is really
sure, yeah.
And really where, so we'd say we've done our very, very best, and we've tried to uncover as much as we can. There may always be some that are some fees that escape us, or whatever. We want to look at including language in our contract that talks about no undisclosed fees. So I cannot and will not give legal language, but I can, and how I've built my practice is I try to dissect language and what are the questions that I can ask to get to good language. And so you want the venue to recognize that they have disclosed in writing in the contract all fees, surcharges, penalties, administrative charges, etc., prior to contract signing. So that's one element that you can be given the assurance that you've done your very best to disclose known fees. And then you want the supplier partner to offer in writing that no additional mandatory fees will be added without consent with the client. So it's that they've disclosed as best they can, and then the client doesn't want any new mandatory fees added after contract signing. We're signing for a piece of business at a certain point in time for a certain amount of revenue, etc. So we want that element reflected. And then we also want to reinforce that if there are any undisclosed fees identified after the contract is executed, that they will be invalid and the client is not responsible for payment of such fees. So it's kind of a threefold approach to that one clause, if you will. But I think what I really want planners to know is that show that you know that you can ask for this language. Showing that you are aware of that there are hidden fees, that we're not, being reactive. We are proactively approaching this discussion, and then having the supplier back it up in writing, that they have disclosed fees, that they will not, the client's not required for new fees, and that anything just not disclosed will be at the discretion of the client.
Wow. Okay.
I don't know. What do the comments say? Is this?
Well, we got some questions. We have time for one.
Right.
And just to recap. So what I heard was build out your own list based on what people contributed here, and from friends and colleagues of all the potential quote unquote hidden fees. And then know to look for them in contracts, and to look for contract language like additional charges or additional fees. So kind of generally taking responsibility, and then having that list including language about no undisclosed fees, no additional fees being added after the signed contract. And the RFP, that was an impressive one too, about saying the RFP will be considered incomplete if you haven't included a list of the defined fees.
And that may, that may be unrealistic in some settings, but I think if we collectively and more proactively and more aggressively require these kinds of practices, we'll move the needle. We have to change in order for us to get change. And we as planners need to make and move the needle. There was a really good question by Will there that I'd love to. If the event is 3 to 5 years away, have you had success in locking in those prices that are that far out? Will, yes and no. So success in attaching a current year price list and using that as the benchmark for future years, so that success in saying that it may be a percentage increase per year in some of those pricing things that might help. The other thing is that asking that at a certain point, so I know when I was actively planning, the journey started 18 months out for an association conference, but we really honed in on that budget, that 9, 10, 11 months out, and maybe building in an opportunity at that point. I'm just going to use a quick example. If your event is on December 31st of a calendar year, then maybe you ask and contract that as of March 1st, 2025, okay, let's use next year, that those price lists are disclosed and that you as the client are held to that pricing. So it won't give you exactly what you're looking for, locked in, but I would say that I use the example of food and beverage. We know how dramatically that has changed, and you'd find it really hard for a supplier partner to agree to locked in pricing. But what you can do, and to help manage the budget, would be to build in a date and time at which you agree the supplier partner offers you the pricing. And it's not, I've seen some that say that, the pricing as of the BEO. Well, folks, that's 30 days out, sometimes 3 weeks out. That's not going to have a good impact on your budget. So maybe that a little gold nugget in there for you, Will. I don't know. So I hope.
Great.
So
thanks,
we're coming to the top of the hour. Crap.
Yeah. We want to be able to send people away on time. So a quick answer, Heather, to an important question. You mentioned your certification earlier in our conversation. So, I'm assuming there are a ton of other undisclosed fees that the people here today and people watching the replay will be concerned about or want to know about. How can planners who want to avoid undisclosed fees, what can they do? What more can they do?
Well, okay. First is,
or how can they work with you?
That's not my initial reaction. My first take it upon yourself to become a champion of not falling victim to any more undisclosed fees. And one of the ways is, here's just a simple thing. Go back and re-listen to this recording and review the LinkedIn comments that are here. There's been some fantastic examples, and you can build your own disclosed or defined fee checklist and use that in every negotiation. You can build that checklist really robustly by paying attention to posts of your peers in the Slack channels, etc. Every time a new one pops up, pop it into your own document. And then I will say, if you don't have the bandwidth, if you don't have the capacity, or actually the interest in forensically, and that's the key word, forensically digging into event contracts, I'd love to have a discussion with you, because it's my total jam. And we do offer a certification program that will, we hope, become the #1 resource to help planners achieve strategic and effective and forensically negotiated event contracts. So it's heather@plannerprotect.ca. Pretty simple.
Love it. And your focus, which I really appreciate, you started off the bat with it too, is fair and balanced. So It's not about either side getting more for themselves than they deserve. It's about fair and balanced. Great. Well, I want to be respectful of people's time. Thank you, Heather. I'll hand it back to you to wrap up.
Awesome. So thanks for being here with me, and thank you for keeping me on track. And I really appreciate that. And I'm so proud to have you on my team. Our next episode is Wednesday, January 15th at 2:30 p.m. Eastern. And the topic next month is case studies in force majeure. So if you thought it was relevant only to hurricanes and global pandemics, think again. I want to discuss 2 real life scenarios that didn't involve COVID and how I was able to carefully negotiate language and work with clients to protect their events and their budgets. So be sure to visit, follow Plan or Protect on LinkedIn, register for that event, and you won't want to miss it. So thank you, everyone, and so long for now.